Hey, you stupid Christian. Don't you go quoting the Ten Commandments to me. I mean, look at you. Polyester suit. Clear violation of Leviticus 19:19. And a tattoo. That violates Leviticus 19:28. Sheesh. What's this? Beef stroganoff. That's a violation of Exodus 23:19. Here. Have some Google cuisine. There's no railing around that roof. Someone sure isn't paying attention to Deuteronomy 22:8. So don't go quoting any Old Testament stuff to me, buddy. You just pick and choose what you want to follow in there yourself.
Excuse me.
Oh, great. It's holding.
Yeah, don't you think you're oversimplifying a bit there?
Nope.
Yeah, of course you don't. Sit down and shut up. Okay, so what is the role of the Old Testament law in the life of the New Testament believer? I'm no random proof texter myself, but what we find is that there is a role for it for the discerning. Initially, the fact that forms the bedrock of our discussion here is a recognition that both the Old and New Testament offer what are called covenants. You might say a sort of contract. In fact, the book of Deuteronomy, which contained the rules of the Jewish covenant, is in the format of an ancient treaty document. In the Old Testament, the way you signed on to the covenant was to show your loyalty to God by being circumcised. In the New Testament, the way you signed on to the covenant was to show your loyalty by professing allegiance to God through the covenant broker, Jesus Christ. And then you publicly demonstrated your loyalty with the entry rite of baptism. That's a simple way of putting it. Now, by itself, that explains why Christians aren't automatically obliged to obey every bit of the Old Testament law regardless of the content. The short of it being, that's a contract they didn't sign. Theoretically, you could sign it, and then as Paul says, you'd be obliged to obey the whole law. But Christians have signed a different contract with different stipulations. Now, all that said, the immediate objection a fundy atheist might make is that if this is all true, a Christian can't appeal to any part of the Old Testament law for moral guidance. But not so fast. Here's an analogy. Let's say we have a landlord who owns an apartment complex. To live in this apartment complex, you have to sign a lease with all sorts of rules. This will be our analogy to the Old Testament. Now let's say the landlord announces that he's opening a new apartment complex. If you're someone who wants to live in the new place, and you want to know what sort of rules you might have to live under, you can certainly wait for the new leases to be composed. But if you're a little impatient, you can take a look at the leases for the old apartment complex to get some idea what sort of rules the landlord might have on the new leases, or what sort of moral values he has. Because it's the same landlord, there will be certain values and morals that will undoubtedly appear on both leases, or else be part of the general moral landscape you'll find in both. Let's say, for example, the landlord is a guy who hates loud music and thinks it drives away potential new residents. There's little doubt that both leases will have as part of their code a rule against loud music. In fact, if the landlord hates loud music and you know this, it doesn't even have to be in the text of the new lease for you to realize that playing loud music in the new apartment complex would get the landlord upset. In this analogy, God is like the landlord, and the rule against loud music in enactment would be comparable to what would be called universal morals, which we'd expect to be common to both Old and New Testament covenants, things like not stealing or not committing idolatry. So that's why it might still be possible to appeal to some Old Testament laws as defining God's moral code, even while not obeying every one of them.